Chittilalla storytime.
Who stole the cookies? Welcome to the bustling city of Whisker Town, where our brave friend, Officer Mittens, lives. With her sleek black fur and bright green eyes, Officer Mittens is the best police cat in the entire town. She wears a tiny police hat and a shiny badge that she is very proud of. Every morning, Officer Mittens puts on her uniform, stretches her paws, and heads out to keep the city safe. She rides around in her special police car, a little blue car with a big red siren. One sunny day, as Officer Mittens was patrolling the park, she hears a cry for help. It's Mrs. Fluffy, the town baker, and she looks very worried.
"Oh, Officer Mittens, please help!"
Cries Mrs. Fluffy.
"Someone has taken the cookie box with my special edition fish-shaped cookies from the bakery. They were for the Whisker Town Festival tomorrow."
Officer Mittens nods confidently.
Don't worry, Mrs. Fluffy. I'll find the thief and bring back your cookies. Do you have any suspects?
Mrs. Fluffy thinks for a moment.
"Well, I did see Ricky the raccoon, Buddy the bulldog, and Luna the wolf sneaking around the bakery last night,"
She says. Officer Mittens looks thoughtful.
That's a good start. Let's see if we can find any more clues.
Officer Mittens begins her investigation. She looks around the bakery and finds some tiny paw prints leading away from the scene. Following the trail, she tiptoes through the park, across the playground, and into a small alleyway. Suddenly, she spots Ricky munching on a cookie behind some trash cans.
Aha! I found the culprit,
Says Officer Mittens.
Ricky, it's not nice to take things that don't belong to you. You need to return those fish-shaped cookies to Mrs. Fluffy.
Ricky looks guilty and lowers his head.
I'm sorry, Officer Mittens, but these aren't Mrs. Fluffy's fish-shaped cookies. These are star-shaped cookies that Chimpy the monkey gave me. I didn't steal them.
Officer Mittens raises an eyebrow.
Really? Let's go and talk to Chimpy.
Ricky agrees, and together they walk to Chimpy the monkey's house. Chimpy confirms the story.
Yes, I gave Ricky some star-shaped cookies that I made yesterday.
Still puzzled, Officer Mittens decides to talk to Buddy the bulldog and Luna the wolf. Both had been seen near the bakery and had histories of minor mischief, making them possible suspects. First, she visits Buddy at his house.
Buddy, where were you last night? Did you steal cookies at the bakery?
Asks Officer Mittens.
I was home all night, and I can't eat cookies anyway. I have a gluten allergy.
Buddy replies. Officer Mittens nods, seeing that Buddy's house is filled with gluten-free snacks.
Okay, that checks out.
Next, she visits Luna the wolf at his house.
Luna, what were you doing last night?
Asks Officer Mittens. Luna looks tired.
I was at the hospital all night. I had a bad fever.
Officer Mittens contacts the hospital, and they confirm Luna's story.
Yes, Luna was here all night.
Confused, Officer Mittens returns to the bakery. Officer Mittens asks Mrs. Fluffy if she remembers anything else. Mrs. Fluffy thinks for a moment.
"Last night, my last customer was Mrs. Gingy Cat. Maybe she saw something?"
Officer Mittens nods and heads to Mrs. Gingy Cat's house. Mrs. Gingy Cat, a friendly ginger cat with green eyes, answers the door.
Hello, Mrs. Gingy. Did you see anything unusual at the bakery yesterday?
Asks Officer Mittens. Suddenly, they hear giggles from under the table. Officer Mittens crouches down and looks under the table. There, she finds Tilly, a small orange kitten with bright blue eyes, giggling.
Tilly, did you take the cookies?
Asks Officer Mittens. Tilly nods, looking guilty.
I'm sorry, Officer Mittens. I thought the tin was so shiny and pretty, so I hid it to play with it. I didn't know it had cookies inside.
Tilly then runs to her room and gets the tin. Officer Mittens smiles kindly.
It's okay, Tilly. We all make mistakes.
She waves goodbye to Mrs. Gingy and Tilly and goes back to the bakery. Back at the bakery, Officer Mittens returns the tin of cookies to Mrs. Fluffy. Mrs. Fluffy thanks Officer Mittens for finding her cookies right on time. Officer Mittens walks down the street, saluting the residents, and returns home, satisfied with solving the mystery. So that's the story of who stole the cookies. It was a wild adventure, full of twists and turns, but in the end, the truth came out thanks to our brave Officer Mittens. The end.
Like, share, and subscribe for more.